Hello, everyone, and welcome to LabStats Tech Talk. I'm Derrick Hirschi, Technical Support Specialist here at LabStats, and I'm joined today by Dr. Ray Pastore, an Associate Professor and eSports Program Coordinator at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Thanks for joining us, Ray. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Derrick?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to have you. So you've kind of been all over the place. You've got an active YouTube channel. You're a published author. You've done work with large companies, the military, number of different universities and organizations, and you got a lot of topics under your belt. But the one that kind of keeps coming up and that really interested us was game design and esports specifically. Many people might say esports are still kind of in their infancy. They're still up and coming, and that they've got a long way to go before they achieve the kind of recognition that traditional sports receive. So I'm really excited to hear your insights on the topic. Talk about what universities should be focusing on, where they should be paying attention, because there's a lot of student development and advancement to be done in this area, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So to start off, kind of from a LabStats spin on thing, we focus on data and things so much here at LabStats. What data insights do you think would be valuable to someone who is running an esports program?
So we are all about data. There is everything, every decision I'm making is data driven. So there's so many different types of data that interest me. So we can start from like a lab perspective. Like, what am I interested in? If I'm running an esports arena or an esports lab, I need to have use, I need to have time, what people are doing, specifically focusing on the esports part. What game are they playing? Any kind of data that I can get will help me show return on investment of my program, will help me show return on investment of my lab, will also help me make decisions for purchasing, budgeting. What kind of teams do we possibly want to have? Do I see students are playing some kind of new game? Any kind of data like that will help me drive those kind of decisions. But the big thing is marketability and just getting that to show the university like, hey, X amount of people are using this lab or using our stuff or are interested in gaming. Any kind of statistics like that are going to be extremely useful for us.
Well, and I think there's so much of in many places you end up with kind of a bias against gaming and gamers.
Yes.
So, it's a waste of time. Oh, you should be focusing on something that actually has a future. That kind of, you hear that all the time. And so if you can come to data with data and say, look, no, here's how it really is. If you're watching the data, I think that'd be very valuable.
Yeah, and there's a couple ways to go. And what you just said, look at that. There's yes, as a coach or captain of a team or director of a program, your students are on a schedule. So you have to make sure they practice X amount of hours, but you don't want them to just spend every single second in the lab either. So you have to monitor that. So all of that goes into that. And when people say that gaming maybe not a great thing, we have to remember, if we start talking to Elon Musk or the late founder of Apple Computer, Steve Jobs, or any of those people, Bill Gates, Steve Wozniak, about how did they get interested in tech? Where did that come from? Every single one of them attributes it to their early days of playing video games. They wanted to learn how to design and create their own game and learn how to program. And that brought them into the next level of things.
Yeah. So that's kind of where a product like LabStats would come in terms of the tracking, how many hours people are putting into games and things, is, being able to see when students are using university resources to practice or to coordinate or to just, hone their skills. You can see what games they're playing, how long they're playing them, when they're the focus time, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And those are all important stats that you need. I mean, that really helps. Every decision is data driven, and you need that data in order to make these decisions, especially for your administrators, your boards, all of the people who control that money.
So keeping with the topic of data, how do you actually measure a student athlete's performance? Is it related to personal wins and loss ratio? Is it related to their observed skills, or is it more of a team-based thing? How do you measure that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's lots of ways you're going to measure performance. So first of all, yes, what you said, you're going to measure win losses and that's like the high level stuff that everyone's going to see. But on top of that, you've got to measure like, what are their interactions like? How do they interact with their team? Are they a good team player? Are they non-toxic? Like, what kinds of things are they writing, typing? How are they using that communication element within esports is super important. And then in addition to that, their GPA and what kind of student are they in in addition to how well they play, but it goes into everything, how they practice, how they perform with a team, how the team performs, their GPA, their communication. There's a lot of things that are going to go into that equation.
And so you mentioned GPA. Traditional sports have a lot of, you're required to keep certain grades or certain amounts of study hours and stuff before you're able to compete. Does esports have the same kind of thing, or is it still too young of a discipline for that to be really set up yet?
It's too young, and it's coming. We're not part of the NCAA, and I don't foresee that happening. Esports is the Wild West right now. There are several organizations really leading the college charge and high school charge and middle school charge and professional charge. We're all in this wild west of it. But the GPA requirement is up to the university to set it. We do have one set, and it is something you have to pay attention to and keep track of. And that with GPA goes in student study hours, student play time, how long are they allowed to practice, how much do they need to study, what kind of grades there's a lot that goes into what kind of person is this.
Okay. And how do students try out for an esports team? Is there kind of a process they go through? I imagine this is probably pretty individual for the organization as well.
It's absolutely going to be individual for the organization, but there are a couple things so the first, most basic thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to look at the students' rank in general, because most of these games the students are playing all have their own ranking system within the game. So the first thing you do is look at all the students' rank, position they play. That's the basic thing that you look at, but then you have to talk to them and make sure, are they the type of person that you want on a team? Because just because someone's good in game doesn't mean that they're not not great on a team. So they might be good individually, not good on a team. You have to make sure people have the right mindset and ability and really want to do it and be on the team. So are they willing to, go by the university's, ethics and, really represent the university and make sure that people are non-toxic and they want to work with others and do well.
Okay. How do you measure the success of the program at large? Is there, I don't know how many competition, other sports, they have these constant set of, scheduled competitions, and scheduled games, scheduled matches with other colleges. How do you measure the success of your esports program?
So it's gonna vary by the size of the esports program and the goals, because there are esports programs that are just kind of like a club that are more for marketing and fun for students and a community place, and that's part of what we have at UNCW. But then there's the competitive side, which is more about what are our wins and losses, how are we doing, who are we competing against, and how are we doing against them, how much are we practicing, and that's where we start to measure that success. And then there's the academic side of esports, where we look at how many students do we have in a program and how much money is that bringing to the program and university.
Okay. How do you encourage or develop? I've always wondered this. How do you encourage or develop a student to a specific game or games of their choice? There's 100 million choices out there for esports, and they come and go like crazy.
Sure.
How do you figure out what games are a good fit for students, or maybe the game they're playing and you're starting to recognize this might not be where you should be. Let's try you over here, that kind of thing. Is that something that happens in esports?
So let's go back to what you guys do in lab stats. You tell us one of the things that your software does is tell us what games students are playing. And most universities that are setting up esports, while there are competitions in all kinds of games, we need to know what kind of population do we have, because that's how we decide what games we're going to play. Because as you said, there are 10 or 20 different competitions for different games happening. So we're not going to compete in all of them. We're going to pick maybe 3 to 6. So I need to find out what games my students are interested in, form teams based on that interest. So that's how most programs are really starting up and working right now, is that we are picking, and there are some more popular games that you're going to have a larger audience for, but there are also smaller ones that's happening with as well. It really just depends on your university and your level of interest and engagement that you have with the students towards that game.
I see. So at what point does it change from encouraging a college kid to play video games to something greater than that?
Well, it all depends on the person and their goals. So Let's say I take just a general student that's interested in the gaming community. I may actually push them towards marketing or management or teaching or whatever their goal is, and figure out how to incorporate gaming and esports into that end goal. But when you start to take the student who is doing exceptionally well and starting to be recognized, having a large viewership number in streams, and performing really well in competition, you're going to start to encourage them to enter that professional level. And we have students at UNCW that are doing that, that are working towards becoming a pro, or they're semi-professional and they're working to get at the highest level.
Is there a discernible threshold that they cross, when it becomes, it's one thing to be competing in esports, but then you're looking at this, a student in front of you going, man, you can go somewhere. How do you know that?
Oh yeah, I mean it's just like any other sport. I mean, let's just take the most basic thing of running. Like, someone can run really fast and someone can run super 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 fast and just blow everyone away. Same thing in esports. You notice the same kind of thing. They rank up in the game way higher and significantly faster than everyone else. It's the same with baseball. They can just hit home runs and hit them farther than everyone else, and they just stand out. I mean, they stand out. And we have a lot of really good players, and there's a lot of really good players out there in the college scene. But when you have a few of them that are the highest level, I mean, I'm talking like top 500 in the world, they really stand out in the servers based on who they are and what they're doing.
So, and another thing that I've always been very, very curious about, it seems like there's a new esport, a new big name game every 4 months. Like, someday it's gone from and it even switches genres as well. How do you choose which game? You mentioned this a little bit. It was kind of up to student choice in some cases, but is there a method you use for kind of determining, we really need to focus on these games because we think these ones are going to be the big ones?
Sure. There's a top 3 big popular esports game, top 3, top 5, whatever you want to say, game that is going to be very common across universities, and those are the games you focus on. But there are new games coming out all the time, but a lot of them are like part 2 of the previous game. For example, the latest Call of Duty game just came out. It's like the next one of the current
number
game.
Like 16 or something like that overall.
So it's not necessarily always like, League of Legends has been around for over 10 years as and it's the number 1 most competitive game. So we're watching Overwatch. They're coming out with Overwatch 2. We're excited for that. But yes, new games do come out, and you just kind of see, is this game going to be an esport? Like, is this game going to be competitive? Do we have enough students that are going to like it? And as you mentioned, like Twitch, the viewership numbers for that game are important too. Like, is this a top 10 channel at Twitch? Like, because that many, but if only like 1,000 people are watching it each day, it's maybe you don't want to compete in that game because you're not going to have interest. But if you see that there's 200,000 people any hour of the day watching that channel, you're like, that's probably, there's something there.
Is there any value to cross training in games? Like, I'm no esport professional by any means, but I play my fair share of video games, and I find I have a hard time switching gears. Even like I'll jump from one shooter to another, and man, if I come into Doom Eternal cold, it's painful. Like, so how does cross training? Is there any cross training to be done?
There's not really cross training, but it does work similar to other sports where, like, if you're a soccer player and you're really good at running, you maybe can pick up like another sport that is somewhat similar. And that's no different from esports. A lot of the professionals, for example, some of the top pros have switched. They were Halo players, which was a first person shooter. And then they switched to, Call of Duty, or now they're the ones playing, they're the best in Fortnite or the new game Valorant. So that skill of having your, that hand-eye coordination on the keyboard, the ability to act fast, the strategies, all are applicable. The ability to aim really fast with a mouse. So some of those skills are going to transfer across game. But yes, you have to learn the new rule set, and you have to be able to play under this new rule set and new maps and new game type. And you
without
have to
making any tactical errors because you thought you had this ability but you don't. That's in the previous game, that kind of thing.
Sure. And when you're talking about like an esport at the professional level, it's just like any other sport where like the littlest error, like in golf, like a golfer misses one putt and they lost the tournament because of that one putt out of 36 holes or whatever. Esports is no different. It's like you missed that one shot, you might lose the game. Like your whole team might lose because you missed one little 1 second thing. It's the same kind of thing. So yeah, you have to be on point.
Changing tracks a little bit. North America's esports infrastructure, the coaching, the talent, the programs, etc. They've been criticized a bit as being underdeveloped compared to other countries, like maybe other regions, like maybe China or Europe or Korea, especially. Do you believe that it is underdeveloped here in the United States compared to those regions?
I think we're catching up. I think sure, like a country like Korea, man, they are on top of it. They've got the investment, they've got the games, and
Well, they've been doing it for so long.
yeah, and that's the thing. We were doing it a long time here too, but it didn't become as popular as it did there. So just culturally they were able to make it something more, and it's happening here, and it's coming, and it'll come. Like I'm convinced that as viewership grows, as financial opportunities grows, as investment opportunities grows, it's going to come. But companies need to see like that return on, they need to see money, and they need to see dollars, and they need to see the viewers. So it's all going to come, and it's happening fast, and it's happening in a lot of different directions. So people aren't sure like what this is going to look like in a few years. Like who's going to take over? What's going to, like, when is it going to like all come together? So we're all kind of waiting for that like magic moment to happen where we're like, this is it. Like, when the NFL became the NFL, like when is esports going to become that? We're piecing that together right now.
And what can we do to kind of close that gap with other, between other countries? I mean, you always hear, such, Korean team won or Chinese team won, and North American teams are there too. But how can we keep moving forward to close the gap?
Well, it's interesting playing against other countries because some of these countries have different rule sets, and like they're not allowed to have chat, or sometimes they're not even allowed to play certain games. So there are very different restrictions, and game popularity is different across these demographics as well. Like if you look at some of the other countries, mobile games are huge and one of the biggest parts of esports, where in North America, it's not, mobile games aren't as popular as they are overseas. So, game popularity difference is different. And, there's a lot of ways that we can compete, but some of these countries are already the investments there where they have kids living in a house and their life is doing this and competing. Whereas we don't have that as much here.
So can you speak a little bit to the development and the structure of esports at universities specifically? Like, let's say you wanted to get an esports program off the ground. How do you go about getting buy-in from an administration who may not see this as a, what do you want this to be, college football kind of a thing?
Sure. So, the first thing I always will recommend is to make sure that you have support by at least some administrator, and you start up small, start a club, see what kind of interest you have. That's how we started, and that's how most programs are starting. They're starting with nothing. They have a couple of students come together, form a team or form a little club, and see where it goes. And what you find is all of a sudden we have a Discord server of 330, 350 students, and we have tournaments where I can bring in 100 competitors. And all of a sudden it becomes that, and people's eyes light up like, wow, what is this? What is this thing, this esports? What are these video games people are playing? And then you start to look at the research and you realize like, wow, the students playing these games are much more interested in STEM careers. And if we want to introduce STEM to our students, having a gaming community at our university is a great way to do that. If we want to get students into computer programs, science, biology, any of those careers, if we want to increase school spirit, we have this community of students that are not being represented in high schools and colleges, that aren't part of the sports scene or whatever scene that's happening there. They're part of the underground gaming community, and bring that up. Let these kids be the star, be the person we're showing on the homepage. And man, it just changes these students. They get excited and passionate, and you hear them talk about it, and it's their lifestyle. It's not just a thing, it's a gaming lifestyle that they have.
That's really cool. And it kind of answers my next question, actually. I was going to ask, is it possible for a smaller school, like a junior college or a technical school, to get started, without the same kinds of universities that a larger school has? But it sounds like the way you're saying, even the larger schools are starting with nothing and very little recognition and having to start from zero.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, some of the best esports programs out there right now are smaller technical schools that got in early or made the investment. Not a lot of schools are afraid to make the investment, or they're not sure what the investment should really be. And then you have some schools building like millions of dollars, like $1 million arena. So it varies so much, but it is something that all schools are going to have. So they all need to be prepared and set up for it because it is going to be the next competitive thing that people are watching. I mean, if you look at the demographic of the 7 to 15-year-old kid, they are home watching someone on YouTube or Twitch stream their favorite video game. They're
Yeah.
not that's what they're watching. That's their form of entertainment, and that's going to carry over to them being students and eventually adults.
So you think this is going to penetrate all levels of the university academic system, just like other college sports? You think this is going to be that big?
Absolutely. And the cool thing about esports is it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have the costs associated with it that other sports do. So it's much more budget friendly for universities to start up. I mean, assuming they don't have like a $5 million arena, obviously budgets can get overboard really quick, but there are ways to do it in a much more budget friendly manner. And there are
Fewer
ways
injuries.
fewer, things like that make it much easier, where even during COVID, like, we're able to just, everyone's at home, we're all still practicing, playing, competing, talking, nothing's really changed. It's just we're not face to face.
That's actually a perfect lead in. I was curious how the pandemic has impacted the esports scene. I imagine from a viewership standpoint, my gut says that viewership might be better now than it might have ever been. But I can also see it potentially having an impact on athlete performance, especially for team-based, where you're not able to really get involved together as much. So I'm kind of curious, what have the effects of the pandemic been?
So good and bad. There's been positive and negative effects. I'll start with the positive is that, yeah, online viewership is way up. We're learning. We've been forced to learn how to have more online tournaments, which is a great thing. Even though we always had online tournaments, just how the logistics of it for like a smaller university. Well, we're like a mid-sized university, but how do we do that as a college? Because we more or less, always focused on the big things, and how do we bring those small online tournaments to the community? And viewership in Twitch and other people are really giving it a chance that really hadn't before, and thought of, oh wow, there is something still happening out there when everything's shut down. And games were a thing that people could turn to during the pandemic, so they didn't go stir crazy sitting at home. So there were lots of positives in that regard. And now negative things that happened in the industry is there weren't any more live events. So like, there's not ticket sales. So like, there's money lost. These stadiums are sitting empty. So like, there's a loss, just like every other industry had, when you're talking about that kind of thing. So there's good and bad to it. So did it impact the industry? Sure. Maybe it probably more positive than negative though.
Which definitely is the difference for a million other sports that all got shut down because
Sure, we weren't shut down.
How do you play contact sports? I mean, the NFL went forward, but many college programs got postponed or shut down, and
Yeah.
you guys didn't have to, it sounds like.
Yeah, esports in general was able to continue, but like some of the big, huge events that we attend, that our teams want to go to, just couldn't happen because they're all live, face to face. And so like big conferences, and now they're not getting, and they didn't make any money in 2020. So are they going to happen in 2021? Like, I don't know what their budgets look like, but that kind of stuff definitely impacted the industry for sure.
So changing tracks a bit again here, back to traditional sports. Some sports have become absolute mainstays, right? You have, last year was a 100th year of the NFL. The NHL was founded in 1917, which is even longer ago. Is it possible for a single game to have that kind of staying power? The only one I could think of that came anywhere close was StarCraft, but that was quite a while ago at this point.
Yeah, and it's still played, and it's still a competitive game, not as big, but it's still played. That's the $1 million question. I mean, I should say that's the billion or $1 trillion question. I don't really have an answer to it. Do games have staying power? Look, League of Legends is the #1 game still, and it has been going for over 10 years as that. So the thing is, the game's going to have to change and adapt, where you're right. It's not like baseball, that baseball is baseball. It's football. Football's football, and there's not like a big change. So maybe what happens, some of the, if I'm thinking about this from like more like, maybe it's more of like a genre. Esports become like the first person shooter game, regardless of what it is, people like, and it's more like, instead of saying football is like saying first person shooter, and or MOBA or whatever, more about the genre of the game and less about the specific game itself, and also a focus on who are the stars at the time, just like we have baseball and football and
Yeah.
hockey stars. Who are the big people, who are the, who are the stars at the time. That's where the focus is. But it'll be interesting to see how that does work, because that's one of the biggest issues in defining esports as this completely separate industry from sports, is that what is the staying power of an individual game.
And it seems to change so much. I mean, currently we're seeing, at least the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of battle royale games, like Fortnite reigning supreme and everything. Before that, it was what I like to call the age of the MOBA, where we had League of Legends and Dota 2 and a million spin-off takes on them. I mean, before that, you kind of only, in terms of names people knew, you kind of only had StarCraft that at least I was aware of, which might be kind of the granddaddy of esports, I suppose, at least certainly coming from Korea. It's just, I wonder if it's just there's too many games trying to get a piece of the pie, and that as such, we end up with every 6 months there's a new one that's dethroned its predecessor.
It's more about the genre. So, like, the people interested in MOBAs are going to continue to play League of Legends and whatever the big MOBA is at the time. And nothing's been able to come close and dethrone that, except maybe Dota 2, which is also another popular game. Same thing with, like, the battle royale. Like, we have Halo, and I mean, yeah, not Halo. We have Fortnite and a few others, but I think that a lot of those big games stay big for a pretty decent amount of time. I think when a new game comes out, sometimes it gets a little hype, and maybe it has hype for a couple months, but it never comes close to that big game. And those, you can't really, make a game after it's like, you can't like remake League of Legends. Like, it's just not going to happen. The game's been out for 10 years. It has so many billions of dollars invested into the development of it that in order to compete with it, you'd have to be able to beat all of that out. And it's so difficult to do that. It's why no one's been able to dethrone World of Warcraft as the, MMORPG. Like, nothing has been able to dethrone that, because the game has been out for like 20 years.
Yeah, how many WoW killers have we seen come and go, and it just every expansion just hits right back up,
because the game's constantly improved. League of Legends just in November, maybe October, November, completely redid their interface, changed all their graphics. Like, the game is being updated for better machines and different things, and they're constantly adding improvements. So to be able to beat it is pretty tough. I think it's more about the genre, and that some people are interested in first-person shooters. Some people are interested in NASCAR. Some people are in NASCAR esports. Some people are interested in NBA 2K like, so it's more about the genre, similar to every other sport. I mean, similar to sports, but I like to look at esports like track and field, where like there's the long jump, the javelin. There's a whole bunch of different things that go into
sense.
it, and it's less like just a football team where you have like coaches and defense and offense and all that stuff. It's more like track and field, where you have a bunch of different events and a bunch of different cool things happening, and you can kind of see where you fit in and what you're interested in. I mean, even if you're not interested in the game, it's really cool to go and watch like a player who's just like dominating everybody.
Yeah.
Like in any sport, I'm interested in that. In golf, and well, I like golf, but even if I'm not interested in the sport, like just to go watch the game and see the team and figure out what's happening is a pretty cool thing.
And so it sounds to me like you're kind of saying it's less about whatever the huge game of the day is, and more about looking deeper and finding out which games have maintained a steady audience.
Yeah,
Whereas,
absolutely.
we might get a flashpoint from a game that really doesn't stick around for very long, but that's all anyone talks about. That's all the memes are about. That's all anybody discusses, even though really it's still League of Legends or some of these, or Fortnite, that really has the staying power.
And the money that goes into making a game a successful esport is enormous. So the chances of a small independent game doing that are hard, because in order to make it an esport, you need to create a tournament around it. And in order to get people to play the tournament, you have to have nice prizes. And that all leads to people wanting to play the game. They want to win. So, it becomes this, how much money do you have to make this happen? So it's difficult for a game not performing well to really make it big all of a sudden. So, you have to perform well, and then your game you'll get the money to actually have big tournaments and create a big user base.
Right. So other sports, these other sports we kind of been talking about, they have kind of a linear progression, right? You're starting out with maybe middle school, you move into high school sports, you get a lot of recognition there, move into, you get recruited by college, move into a college program, and if you can really shine there, you can make it into professional games. But you and I were talking a little while ago about how some of these students are already professionals. They're just in
Yeah.
college. They've been professionals
Oh yeah,
for
even
who knows
younger.
how
Yeah.
long.
Hmm.
Does that how do you work with that? Does that give them maybe more status or standing in the program if you're dealing with somebody who's already got 500,000 followers on Twitch, but they're here in your classroom practicing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that does matter. And the progression in esports happens in the game itself and in the competition. So like there are ranking systems in game. So that's where that progression's happening. It's not like, I mean, a kid that is 9 years old turning on League of Legends for the first time is in the same ranking system as the top professionals. They're compete literally. I mean, they won't ever play together because their scores are too different. Their what's called their MMR, their background score is too different, but they're in the same league competing. So it's not like football. Like an 8-year-old football player is never able to compete in the same kind of tournament or league that a top professional football player in the NFL is, where in esports that happens, which is why an 8-year-old can be really good and climb the ranks and get to a point where they are playing at 8 or 9 or 10 those top people. It's a possibility for them because the background and everything is there. The infrastructure is there for them to do that. Now, once they reach that rank, they have to go compete in actual tournaments. So it becomes up to their parents to enter them and all that kind of stuff. But
Right.
it's the possibility is there for those kind of people to do that.
How does a student? Students who are coming in maybe to college, right? My understanding, and we talked about this a little bit. The time where a student where an athlete is at their prime is probably a bit younger. You're talking 17 to 24, something like that,
Sure.
which means a student might be coming down the other side of an esports career when they graduate college.
Could
When
be.
they get their degree. Are there ways to support those students? They're coming out and they're and what they've done with their lives might be coming to an end somewhat.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, esports has created a whole industry around new jobs for people who want to be a shoutcaster and simply narrate tournaments, or just different kinds of marketing or managing esports organizations. I just saw a job, and I've interviewed an esports psychologist, who works with the teams to help their mental
Interesting.
status during the game. I mean, we're having one of the guys teaching one of my courses this semester is an esports entertainment attorney. He focuses on esports law, and there are trainers, physical trainers who are training esports teams. There are doctors who are the doctor for the esports team, chiropractor for the esports team. There are everything. We've created this new industry around all these different positions. So usually what I do, we started a certificate program around esports, and really the certificate is designed to get students to learn about the industry, get some experience like developing projects, and actually build a little portfolio so that when a student like that graduates, they have a career to turn to. Like let's say the student is a marketing major. They get the esports certificate, they get their marketing degree, and they have this name in esports, and they leave and they're going to get picked up by an organization to do the marketing, be the marketing person for them. So they have to find that career path though, based on their personal interest.
And you really piqued my interest with your statement about a psychologist for the esports team. Like, many Super Bowls coming up, in a month or two, right? And you have these athletes who are, they're fully mature, they're fully grown and developed, and they're playing on the biggest stage in the world. Well, then in esports, you got these 17, 16-year-olds who now are under a similar level of pressure.
Sure.
And the pro athletes in other sports have 15, 20 years on them. I can't imagine the kind of pressure that puts a young mind under to be at that
Yeah.
level.
Absolutely. Just learning how to, when I make a mistake, how do I refocus and get back to my state of flow where I am not going to be angry, and make sure that anger doesn't come out and mess me up the rest of the game.
Right.
how do I keep that mental energy? What happens when we're down at halftime? How do we come back from that? All professional sports teams have a sports psychologist. So there's a reason that it's starting to happen in esports as well. I mean, we're following right along with that.
It's interesting. That was fascinating to me. So we'll jump tracks a little bit here. Let's say you're a university IT director, and you've got people in your university who are wanting to start an esports team. Are there things that as an IT director you might be interested in, things you might need to pay attention to, or questions you should be asking about this?
Sure. So, I mean, my role is as a faculty member, but I have to work with our ITS, which is called ITS at my university department, a lot because they control the whole infrastructure that you're going to play on, everything about it. So first of all, what kind of technology is there? Like computer wise, like do you have machines that are actually going to run this stuff? And then do the rooms where you're doing this, do the rooms have the electricity and the type of air conditioner that are needed to cool down a room and run the computer so the room doesn't blow up?
Anybody who's been to a LAN party knows what that gets to be like.
Yeah. Do you have, do you have the internet speed, and are you able to dedicate speed to those rooms? Because you know what, if there's a lag in that lab during a major tournament, you could have caused your university to lose a big game. So everything about it. I mean, there's so many things from a tech perspective that someone in, an information technology role at a university needs to pay attention to. So they need to work very closely with whoever's doing the esports program and make sure that everything is meshed together and working nicely and good.
And even just system performance. I mean, frames per second is so important for the really high level esports athletes. Something
100%.
that you said in a previous call I was very interested in was that sometimes you'll have a separate machine that's running Discord.
Oh yeah,
while
no,
you have
to.
nothing running on your primary machine. And I had never even thought about that.
I mean, this is running most of my stuff next to me while I am playing. I have an iPad sitting next to me here. Where is my other laptop? Oh, it might be on the floor or something, but I have another laptop here that I run right next to me. I mean, I have to have multiple machines set, and my main machine has 3 monitors hooked up to it. Just so that I can, because you're trying to stream, you're trying to record your game, you're
Right.
trying to have chat open and possibly
And that has
chatting.
to be done on the primary machine.
Yeah. So you've got to like be all ready for all this stuff, all this tech, all these problems. So in addition to playing a game, you're become like a tech expert to learn how to run all the technology and how to record and what software do you need and lighting and backgrounds and so much stuff starts to go into it when you start to think about it.
Interesting. Man, this has been fascinating. So to kind of wrap up here, I'd like to ask you what you think the next 5 years in esports kind of look like. Now, and my caveat to that is, can you even predict that far, and with what certainty?
So no, I can't predict that far. Yes, I can tell you what I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
But it could very well differ. Because if you would have asked me a year ago if I think that like a stock like Tesla would be worth 1,500% what it was, I would have said no way. And it is. Like, it's so difficult to predict in these technological fields what's going to happen. So things that I think are going to happen. One, I think that esports viewership is going to continue to climb as people get interested in it. I think that the industry is going to define itself. I think that organizations at the middle school, high school, college, and professional level, there's going to be an organization at each of those levels that rises up and becomes number one. Similar to what happened in MMA with the UFC.
Yeah.
Or any other if you can study any kind of new sport that has come out, there's going to be an organization that comes out and starts to run the show. Assuming that happens, I think that you're going to start to see a lot more of the money invested being returned. Like, there's a lot of people investing and just throwing money in the esports right now. And you've got to think like, how are you going to get your money back? And so I think that's going to all start to come together. We're going to see organizations fail, and we're going to see organizations be successful. And there's going to be a lot of ups and downs in that whole. It's going to be a big roller coaster ride to the top. It's going to be a line up, but it's going to be a roller coaster ride. There's going to be ups and downs. You're going to see failures. You're going to see startups. You're already seeing people start up, software as a service companies around esports, all kinds of software is being released. People are trying to really get in on the industry, be the t-shirt maker, have the brand that all the t-shirts want,
all the merchandise.
Yeah. All the merchandise. Like, there are companies really out there competing for all that. So who's going to win? And And are people going to buy it? And what are the interests? Like where, one of the biggest questions is how is the money, what is the business model of esports? That's the biggest question right now, because you have all these viewers, and how are you going to make money? How are teams? How are tournaments? How are game companies? How are publishers? How are all the people going to actually make a significant amount of money that this keeps growing? And it's figuring all of that out. I mean, esports is a whole different thing than traditional sports. Traditional sports, as you said, started over 100 years ago. A lot of these sports, they've had 100 years to perfect and create what they have. Esports started on the internet, basically. I mean, really, first competition in the 70s, but from 2014, when Justin TV became Twitch TV, is when it really became much more mainstream than it was. That was when I say like a big change in the industry happened at that point. And people are used to viewing it for free, viewing it on Twitch for free. How are we going to monetize this, and where is that business model going to come in? I think all those are great questions that we are going to see answered in the next 5 years.
Interesting. And so it's not college football, not yet anyways. But
No.
you definitely foresee it getting there, and that being the next, you said the Wild West, but that's kind of the next frontier that college programs should be eyeing or thinking very carefully about.
Yeah, it's going to have an audience. It's not going to be like college. It's not going to be, and not to say a sport doesn't have a good audience, but it's not going to be it's going to be much closer to a college baseball, basketball, football than other college sports. It's going to have an audience. There's going to be teams. There already are people wearing, I've got a UNCW esports shirt on right now, and people are wearing them. People are buying them. So there is that sense of pride. It's a community that wasn't reached, and all of a sudden they are. So yeah, that stuff is going to happen, and it is going to, whether it's as big as any of these other sports, I have no idea, but it is going to make a significant impact at least.
All right. Well, Dr. Ray Pastore has been with us. Thank you very much, Ray. Really appreciate you joining us for this Tech Talk. It's been wonderful talking to you. And once again, you were with the University of North Carolina, Wilmington,
Yes.
and heading up kind of their coordinating their esports program and stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Great talk.